Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. Justin Baker in studio. Good evening, sir.
It is evening, yeah, after 5 o'clock.
Yes, it is evening. It is a wonderful Thursday evening in the National Hockey League. Of course, we have lots to talk about. No trades.
Do we?
No trades.
I honestly thought we were coming to talk about Captain Marvel this week, but...
Oh, you saw that garbage?
I did. That garbage.
Was it garbage?
No, actually, it wasn't that bad. I'd give it a solid B, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was decent.
The woman that played Captain Marvel,
Brie Larson.
She's in Jack Ryan, I think, is what she's in.
No. That's another woman. She was. Yeah, Brie Larson got famous because of the movie Rooms. I'm sorry.
Oh, Rooms.
She got an Oscar
Room
for
is
it.
What didn't John, whatever his name is,
John Krasinski?
Isn't he the one that wrote
He's Jack Ryan.
Isn't he the one that wrote Rooms?
No, you're thinking A Quiet Place.
Oh, Quiet Place.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why I don't have a podcast about movies. Anybody want to have me a guest on your Marvel show? Because I don't know.
Yeah, let's stop talking about this now.
Anywho, lots to talk about in the National Hockey League. There are some superheroes dancing around this league right now, but
good segue.
Yes. We are specifically going to focus in on not trades that will happen, but trades that have happened. And we're going to just kind of run through the bigger names that were dealt at the deadline. I think we have around 10 of them. And we're just going to kind of check up on them, see how they're doing. And, I've watched some players' games, not all of them have I seen live since. So admittedly, some of this, we're looking at a stat line, which ultimately it certainly serves some purpose. But I think, we can also we can look at, for example, with Wayne Simmons. We'll just start this off. We'll dive right into Wayne Simmons. After we do this, we'll talk specific on playoff races. But for now, we'll just focus in on individual players. Wayne Simmons, 1 assist since coming over the Preds. Granted, we're 6 games in, so it's tough because a guy comes from another team and he's got to get used to a new system, and he is playing 2.5 minutes less a game, which might not sound significant, but he's certainly not being put into situations that he was used to being put in Philadelphia.
No, he's definitely not being looked at as a guy who has to fill in the top 6, right? He has to be one of the top scorers for that team because let's face it, Nashville's got a pretty good roster up and down, and I think too there's been a lot of line shuffling too since he's come there because Philip Forsberg has been out, a little bit since he got over.
I think that would be a reason to move Simmons up in the lineup. Yeah,
but I think when a guy's trying to acclimate himself to a new system, when you can't gel with, maybe a certain line and you're up and down the board, you're playing with Johansson, then you're playing with Nick Bonino and then Colton Sissons, when you don't have consistency, whether it is just center or just 2 line mates in general, I think it's a little bit harder to acclimate to a system and, when you're not used to it, I guess. But
yeah, one very telling stat to me is his offensive zone starts. So he has started 71% of the time in the offensive zone when he's out there for a faceoff.
Wow. That
is remarkable. The highest that he's ever had with a single team up to this point was 59% in 16-17 with the Flyers. And of course, this is only over the course of 6 games. So again, this isn't necessarily, you start a bunch in your offensive zone in 3 of those games, and those numbers are kind of thrown off a little bit. But it does show that they aren't exactly, looking to use him in the defensive zone, which is interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you got guys like Brian Boyle and Colton Sissons who are very good two-way guys, why you don't need a guy like Simmons, right? Like, Philadelphia, they had a bunch of younger guys like Jordan Wheel or Konechny, guys that maybe you wouldn't trust right away, at least not this young in their career, to start in the defensive zone as much. So you rely more on veterans to do that kind of thing. Guys who are good at faceoffs, guys who know how to, play that two-way game. And I'm not knocking Simmons on it at all. I think he's a very capable two-way player. Not one of the best, but he's still very capable. And so I think when you're blessed with as many quality two-way guys as Nashville has, guys that can play in the defensive zone, you don't have a need for a guy like Simmons to constantly be there.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I think one way too that we can kind of figure out, all right, how big of an impact has he had since he got there? Let's look at the team's record since he started playing there, and the Predators are 3-3. So for the most part, I would say that actually, and we can't, of course, look at Wayne Simmons and go, oh, he's the reason they lost all 3 of those games, or any of those games matter. It's just that, it's an easy measuring stick, and since he got there, he really hasn't been. You know what? I totally lied. He's not 3-3. I'm sorry. I was looking a little further up. So they are actually 2-4.
Oh,
so
well, even better.
Yeah. So I mean I don't know. That's not necessarily a sparkling review, I would say. And I mean his 1 assist did come in a win, but it's.
No, I think his real
not
value,
like a huge impact at this point. Although he did play 19 minutes and 36 seconds in a loss to Nashville in their last game.
Okay,
so.
Yeah, I do think his real value though is going to come playoff time. If he performs, like if he ends up being one of those role players like Lars Eller was for Washington.
They'll be good.
Yeah, if he can get mothers, cover your ears. Yeah, so if he can,
they totally understand.
Yeah, that's true. They do.
They are mothers after.
Oh boy, let's just move on.
Let's move on to Kevin Fiala, another Nashville Predator. It's. I mean, obviously now we know since acquiring him, they're also, that what do we have here? I'm so sorry. They're 1 and they've lost 2 games in a shootout. Although one of those games he was playing for Minnesota. I don't know. This game log's a little confusing. It's okay.
This game log.
Anywho, I should learn how to read a game log.
All right, 7 games in mini. Two goals.
2 goals, and they came in the same game in a shootout loss to Minnesota. So the 2 goals he scored were against the goalie that he practiced against his whole career.
Congrats.
No, not his whole career. Well, sort of, yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, he's been in Nashville ever since the trade.
So yeah, I mean, he's got 2 goals, and he had 1 really solid game. He actually he's had 2 games where he had 3 shots and 4 shots and another one, and so I mean, I don't know how big of a difference they expected Kevin Fiala to make right away. Certainly, it was nice that he got those 2 goals, but Minnesota really has struggled since he came on. And I understand now why I was reading that game log wrong, because I was thinking that Kevin Fiala, Nashville Predators, didn't even dawn on me that he actually plays for the Minnesota Wild.
And got traded
That's
from
who
Nashville.
He was traded to, yes. So, yeah, because they played Nashville twice since he's been there, that's what threw me off.
Good old Granlund trade.
So they are 2-2 since he got there.
Well, at least they're 500.
At least they're consistent.
Yeah, Minnesota. There's a team that I'm going to enjoy talking about a little bit later. But Fiala, he gets to play top line minutes with Parise and Stahl, so you would think the production would be a little bit more. I mean, he's expected to be one of their top offensive guys. Now, another guy on their team that maybe we could segue right into, Ryan Donato. He's looked pretty good since he came over from Boston, and that trade's looking pretty good for Minnesota right now.
Yeah, with Charlie Coyle coming over.
Yeah, good old Coyle.
Yeah, Coyle, not so much. 1 assist in 9 games. He's averaged 14.5 minutes a game, and he's been good in the faceoff circle. He actually has his best faceoff percentage, 9 games in since 17-18 season. So that's a benefit. He has been very good in terms of possession. I mean, his Fenwick is a 61.3. Of course,
Wow.
he's a 60.2. So that's I would say elite level possession. Now, the players that he's playing alongside are certainly helping to push that possession as well. Definitely not like a crazy offensive zone start percentage, 52.6%. And actually his PDO is quite low at 96.9. The on-ice shooting percentage for him right now in Boston is 1.4%, which my guess is that means that 1 goal has been scored since one goal has been scored with him on the ice since they got him, and it was the one that he assisted.
Ouch.
That's tough to do almost. But at the same time, he's only been on the ice for 2 in 9 games. So that's not bad. So, I mean, I guess you could say that at very least, he's eating up minutes for this team, which is partially what they need. Because that top line can drive possession. They need someone else to at least be neutral.
Yeah, that's oh boy. Yeah, Charlie Coyle, I I didn't like this trade for Boston when they did it because they had to give up such a young, talented piece in Donato. I understand why they wanted to do it. They wanted to bring in a guy to anchor that third line center position. And Coyle, he's played most of his career on the wing or at times at center. And so he came into this league as a center, right? So, I understand it, but it just wasn't the right move in my opinion. And I don't think, like we're seeing right now, it hasn't panned out. So they got him on the wing with Krejci now because he's just not playing. He's not driving offense on that third line.
Right. And when you look at how well Donato's played, you makes you wonder what was going on in Boston. Why wasn't he playing more? Push him up to the second line center because it's pretty clear. He's playing the wing in Minnesota, I should say, but he could play alongside the wing.
He could
have against Krejci, but he's got 9 points in 10 games. He's been playing very well in Minnesota. I think, sometimes it's just, you just need a fresh breath of air, and that's Bruce Boudreau has put him into a situation where he is succeeding. He's actually starting 53.5% of his faceoffs in the defensive zone. So they're relying on him defensively, playing him about 15, 16 minutes a night on average. And it's working out real well for them.
Yeah. I can't remember.
Which it's about time that a trade worked out for Minnesota. Yeah. They're trading away Niederreiter for Tuukka Rask's ugly cousin.
Oh, it's not
Victor.
Oh goodness. Yeah, Donato. Let's see. He is a restricted free agent after this year, so I suspect he'll get a nice little raise from Minnesota. They'll probably want to keep a little bump. Maybe give him that Charlie Coyle money.
3.5, 4.5, somewhere in there. And that was probably some of the Bruins' thought process as well, is that he's going to sign this deal, and they maybe don't have the space for it because they signed some players like David Backes to long-term deals that aren't working out.
Yep. And Coyle to me is David Backes 2.0. So congrats. At least Coyle's only got one more year left on his deal. So congrats.
I will say this about Donato. You make a great point. He is the highest scoring player dealt at the deadline thus far.
Nice.
Let's go Matt Duchene, who has played 11 games for the Blue Jackets. We'll just kind of wrap Duchene and Dzingel in here together. 11 games, 2 goals, 3 assists. He's got his 5 points. Crushing it in the faceoff circle as he always does, 57.8%. He's playing about 18 minutes a game, a little less than he was in Ottawa, but that's expected. He is starting 63% of his draws in the offensive zone. So Tortorella focused on setting him in the offensive zone, not really giving him much defensive responsibilities, which sort of makes sense because they do have maybe some other guys that can.
Yeah, you got Brandon Dubinsky, Boone Jenner, guys that can go in there and play a two-way game. And yeah, so yeah, you don't have to rely on Duchene to be that defensive guy, and you want to unleash the beast, as they say. Yeah,
and he has his best possession numbers since 2016-17 with Colorado. So I'd say that's a healthy uptick in his possession, that now you're putting him with some players that are good, and he's above that 50% mark with his possession. His PDO has actually been it's 97.7. That's not that it's not that crazy. Shooting percentage has been 10% when he's on the ice. It's a little above average, but he's also playing with some really good players. It's the fact that he leaves. So in Ottawa, his on ice shooting save percentage was 87.6%. I mean, that's you're just naturally going to be minus. That's why he was actually tipped the cap to the guy. He was only a -4 in Ottawa, but in Columbus here he's a -2. Not that we really care too much about that -2, but 87.7% save percentage when he's on the ice with Columbus. So the save the goaltending hasn't necessarily been much better in Columbus than it was in Ottawa, and you look at that, and to me that is concerning for Blue Jackets fans who are desperately trying to make the playoffs and are currently they're sitting on the outs. They're just on the inside, having more regulation overtime wins than Montreal, and a big win against the Boston Bruins. So
yeah, very nice win. Now talk about another guy in Columbus, Dzingel. A guy who's put up 6 points in 9 games, looking pretty good. Columbus native.
Outscoring
Yeah.
Duchesne.
So it kind of makes you wonder, right? So I'm still of the mindset that, Panarin is going to be not in Columbus next year.
See ya.
See ya. So I want to know your opinion. Do you think either one of these two guys are getting re-signed next, this offseason here?
I'm going to say that it kind of is going to depend on what they do here. I mean, I got to imagine that they'll be willing to throw money at someone. They have to. They have to throw money at somebody because they have to have someone, and they've proven that this team does care about winning. They're not just going to go spend money for the sake of spending money, but it's not that these owners don't understand we got to pay to get a good player. I think that's understood when, they want to keep Panarin, but Panarin's probably going to leave. Duchesne, Dzingel, not a bad prize, I guess secondary prize, but at the same time, Duchesne's never won anything in this league.
It's true.
And Dzingel has been to the Stanley Cup Finals, the conference finals, I should say.
Yeah.
Within one goal of the Stanley Cup Finals.
One goal.
Something interesting to me since acquiring Duchesne. I mean, in the last, we're looking at five games, Panarin has an assist. And when I think about the reasoning for bringing in Duchesne and Dzingel, well, it's to provide depth and to allow Panarin to play with a really good center. Whether he's playing with Dubois or he's playing with Duchesne, it just takes pressure off Panarin because there's other players that the opposing team has to focus on. And he hasn't been playing great. He has one goal since Duchesne joined the Columbus Blue Jackets. That was 11 games ago. That one goal in 11 games, but he has 25 goals in the year. So he had 24 goals in the 50 games prior to that, or 55 or whatever it is, and then now he's in 11 games he's got one.
Yeah, and his ice time really isn't dipping either. I mean, you look outside of the Boston game where he only played 15 minutes. I mean, he's still putting up 20, 21, even went as high as 22 and a half against Pittsburgh. And so the minutes aren't dropping for him at all, which is just it's crazy to think about. You usually think when, guys aren't scoring, maybe it's because you would think, oh, well, Duchesne's here, so his ice time's going to drop and he's not going to get as many opportunities to play. And it's not the case here at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a winger, but the thing that's crazy to me is 76.4% of his draws are in the offensive zone. I mean,
dang.
Tortorella does not trust this guy whatsoever. Even for all the talk about how Panarin is such a possession driver, well, yeah, no kidding. He doesn't play in the defensive zone. He doesn't start in the defensive zone. every 4 faceoffs happen in the offensive zone. So let's say your team wins 50% of those. So that's 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 times at least out of the 4 faceoffs that you take that you immediately get possession, and you're almost always getting a shot off of that possession if you win that draw cleanly. One of those 4, you're assuming that you are, and maybe you're winning 2 or 3 of those 4. And so, I mean, he's really put into a position to where he can succeed, and he's not having to take any defensive responsibilities. So for all the talk about him being somebody who can just drive possession, it's not that I don't think he's really, really good. Do I want to pay him $10 million to come to my team, though? I don't think so.
Boy, yeah, that new Stone deal, though, is going to make it hard for him to argue the other way.
Stone. Remind us what Stone's new deal was.
It's going to be $9.5 million.
He hasn't signed it yet.
No, hasn't signed it. But I mean, if you're Panarin, you're going to say, okay, he's in a state where there's no, state tax, right? So, okay, well, because of that, I should get at least a million and a quarter more,
right,
for that purpose. Right. So, are you going to pay him $11 million? I'm not paying him 11.
No.
So
yeah, no, especially for a winger.
Exactly.
That's where I have trouble with that. Well, let's a good segue over to Mark Stone. Let's scoot on over to him. Kind of was a little slow going early on in those first few games. Granted, he hasn't played that many games for Vegas. He's played 6-7 games for Vegas, and he's got 4 points in his last 3 games and only 1 before that. So I think that's a good progression for him. He now has 2 goals in his last 2 games, and Vegas should make the playoffs here. I mean, it's it's to me very unlikely that they get caught by any of these teams, especially being 7 points up on Minnesota. So I suppose there's a very, very far outside chance that Arizona could catch them for that third slot.
Yeah, those three teams in the Pacific are locked in.
Yeah,
they're not going anywhere.
It's like Calgary and San Jose are battling for that first spot. I mean, Calgary
second in the NHL too.
Calgary's certainly making their presence known, just absolutely putting it to the New Jersey Devils the other night. And they won 9-4.
What a
9-4. That's not a score you see very often. That's like a baseball score, and that even is a pretty good shellacking in baseball. So
6 points for Goudreau.
Yeah,
insane,
unreal. Yeah, that's an unreal night. Who do we want to go to next? We can just kind of let's jump over to Gustav Nyquist. He was one of the first guys dealt at that deadline. Goes to the San Jose Sharks from the Red Wings, and actually having a pretty good start. I'd say he's got 3 goals in 7 games, 4 points. And he's been given enough responsibility. He's playing 16 minutes a night. And so, your thoughts on Gustav Nyquist with the Sharks?
Yeah, I think he's doing exactly what they kind of thought he would do, right? I mean, a majority of players, right, unless they're there to drive a top line on your team, it's going to take him a little bit to get acclimated. And I think for him spending most of his, a majority of his games with Joe Thornton on that third line now, and now he's kind of bumped up, because Evander Kane's been out, unfortunately, and for those who haven't heard the news, I found out on the way over here that apparently his 26-week-old daughter passed away, unfortunately, and our thoughts and prayers go out. That's
terrible.
Yeah, terrible. But Nyquist, so he's one of those guys you can move up and down the lineup so easily, and he plays a good enough two-way game where you don't have to worry about him defensively messing up, or being one of those guys where you're like, oh, well, let's not put him against the team's top line. You can put him up anywhere you want, and he's going to produce, and he's still got enough good speed. He's got enough playmaking ability. Granted, he doesn't go into those hard areas, to make those kind of, to plays like Pavelski might.
Do you need to?
Well, exactly. No, you don't. Not at all.
Thornton will go into some of those areas, but Thornton just can thread the needle, and so you just have to kind of get yourself open a little bit.
Just put your stick on the ground, he'll put it there.
Right, and actually, for a guy who was playing on such a bad team, Detroit, he still had positive possession numbers, which is impressive. But now coming to San Jose, a 56-7 Fenwick is extremely good, especially for playing on a third line. Like, that's, I would say, borderline, like top 5 third lines in the league. When he's playing with Thornton there, and he's practically up the middle on his own starts, and so I think it's a really nice fit, and he may actually end up being one of the sleeper picks for one of the best pickups here at the deadline, because the Sharks have flipped that switch, and they look like it's going to be hard in the playoffs to beat the Sharks.
Yeah, they're going to be tough, but the only knock I had against Gustav Nyquist is playoff time. He hasn't really been there for the Wings in the past. And granted, their first playoff appearance, he was 22 in 2011, 2012. He only got 4 games, but after that, next year he got 14 games.
He only averaged 8 minutes and 52 seconds of ice time, so hard to blame him for much there.
No. But the last 4 seasons that he was in the playoffs with Detroit, those last 3, they were bounced in the first round, by Tampa Bay most of the time, or Boston, and so it never really got the ice time or the game experience to really see if he could really produce. So outside of that one in 2013 where he got 14 games, but only 5 points. And so I'm interested to see what he can produce in the playoffs.
Guy was only playing 12 and a half minutes.
I know. Yeah.
That's,
it's not bad though for a third line guy.
For 60, that's not bad.
No, not at all.
And that's I think also what you have to look at. That 2012-13 team, he was playing like third line with a little bit of second power play time, so he wasn't nearly the guy that they relied on later on, which is frankly exactly where he is now with San Jose. So it'll be interesting to see if come playoff time he can be impactful. But I think that his defensive abilities alone, he can at least neutralize.
Yeah, right now he's getting 48.9% in the defensive zone starts, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
So he's being relied upon a little bit for that.
Yeah, let's skip on over to Kevin Hayes, where I would say that he's been one of the better pickups in terms of production. He's got 2 goals, 3 assists. He's been relied upon. He's winning faceoffs. He actually has the best faceoff percentage of his career in the first 7 games with the Jets.
All right.
So hey, that's if that can continue, that's just an extra bonus. He is starting 64% of the time in the offensive zone, so he's definitely being set up to play in that offensive zone. And to me, that's exactly what you want, because you're not afraid of putting Brian Little into the defensive zone, and you're also not afraid of using that top line in the defensive zone as well. So Scheifele taking those draws in the defensive zone is really what you want.
He and Wheeler just phenomenal two-way guys.
Exactly. Which is a unique thing for, a top line to, you're really maybe going to think about relying on them more in the defensive zone, where a lot of teams have that specialty defensive line or that center who can come in and win your draw and then get off the ice and replace himself with the better player. But they do have that unique two-way game. Have you had a chance to see Kevin Hayes play with the Jets at all yet?
I have not, unfortunately.
Yeah. He, the nice thing is Winnipeg just gets even bigger. Like, he's a monster, 6'5", 215. And so, it's, I think he fits well. You get a team that also they play pretty heavy. And so I think that Kevin Hayes isn't exactly known for just blowing guys up. I think that it can encourage a guy to maybe play a little heavier when he's got those players around him.
Yeah, he's got a little speed to his game, and not he's not slowed by big guy standards for sure. And let's face it, once playoff time starts, that's when the grinding starts, right? And so when you get deep, that second round, when potentially maybe they have to play Nashville, and there's a team that really grinds, wears you down, he'll come in handy.
Yep, that's very true. And I mean, they needed that third center. I mean, it was they were looking for it all year long ever since they lost Paul Stastny. Okay, let's go to the Colorado Avalanche and Derek Brassard. Since joining the Avalanche, he and the Avalanche, I would say, have struggled for the most part. He's got 2 goals in 8 games, and that is the extent to which he has produced. That goal, I think both those goals came in a loss, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they did. Both those goals came in a loss. So even when he's produced, it hasn't exactly mattered. So
nope.
They have won 3 games since he got there out of the, what did I say, out of the 9?
8 games.
Out of the 8 games. So they've really struggled. They're falling fast. Just lost 3-0 to the Hurricanes. Maybe fortunately they get a game against Anaheim here next, which pretty much everyone beats Anaheim. So I can maybe assume that that's 2 points in the win column.
Listen, he's playing alongside Nathan McKinnon. If you can't produce,
right?
I got worries for that guy right now. Yeah.
So it's just. I think that Derek Brassard was a nice player 3 years ago, and he's 31 years old, and he's kind of hit that, like, some of those middle of the road guys hit 30 and that's it.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's the fact that when he went to Pittsburgh, he got put on that third line. He wasn't given the opportunity to be a top 6 guy like he wanted to, and maybe mentally that just did something to him. And so maybe this offseason, right, he needs to go into a team that signs him to a cheap 1-year contract, and he can reset mentally and then go back in fresh to start the season and maybe win a spot back.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
yeah, not that he maybe can't go somewhere else and produce, but right. My guess is that he plays on a bad team and he's decent. I could see him going back to Ottawa if he. I don't remember the relationship between him and Ottawa when he left. I don't think that it was bad. I think that it was just that they were looking to move him out because he was costing them money and they needed a drop of somebody. So, I could see him going back to Ottawa.
Stick him in Arizona with Stepan so they can put that number 1-2 center line together again.
Right. There we go. Let's go to Michael Granlund, who has 4 points in 5 games. He's got the 1 goal. He's not exactly a guy who's going to light the lamp for you, and so we can maybe assume that'll come. He's playing almost 18 minutes a game. I'm surprised at. His offensive zone starts pretty much even with what he was used to. I am surprised though that his possession has actually taken a dip since coming to Nashville, which is not something that I would expect him coming over to the Predators, who are a pretty good possession team anyways. The fit seems to be there, but I think that this is just a case of he's only played 5 games. And I think this is just a case of he just needs some time in their system, maybe a little more complicated than Boudreau's. Like, just go play and have fun.
Right. And not to mention, too, he was the top center, in Minnesota, right? He was looked upon as that guy, that number 1 center. And now he's playing second-line minutes. And not only that, but he's playing on the wing, which, granted, that's a little less defensive responsibility, but maybe that's something he thrived upon, right? Playing up and down that middle. And now, having to stick to the left side, maybe that's just not his thing.
Which that's just happened because of injuries, right? Like,
sure.
The plan, I think, long term has got to be that he's that third line center, or maybe he's the second line center and you bump Turris down. That doesn't.
I would think that's the plan, but
yeah,
who knows?
So yeah, we'll TBD on Michael Granlund. Lastly, Matt Zuccarello, we're going to just kind of gloss over because he scored a goal. And he has the best points per 60 out of any player traded at the deadline. That's because he scored in the first, 5 minutes of ice time. So, and then he got injured and he's out he's not out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, he's done.
Is he out for the rest of the year?
Yeah, it was 4 weeks. So if he comes back, he might get a game or two back.
Okay.
At the end of the year, depending on how it goes.
Playoffs. He'll play in the playoffs.
Yeah, he'll be ready for the playoffs.
And Dallas looks like my guess is, they're 7-3 in their last 10. They're in a good spot right now, and a big tonight Dallas plays Minnesota, so
there'll be a playoff game right there.
That can be very telling. If Dallas is able to win that game, they pull 5 points ahead of teams outside the playoffs, and that probably seals it with 12 games left to go. Marcus Johansson traded from the Washington Capitals to the Boston Bruins. Another player on the Bruins that I know he got hurt. He got hurt, but 4 games in, had an assist in the first 3 games, but was used somewhat sparingly in the first. Or he was used pretty well. I'm sorry, in the first few games, but then of course a 59-second game will make that number look a lot worse than it actually is because he got hurt really early on, but. So again, another kind of just like a disappointment, but not for the lack of playing. He can't play right now.
Yeah, that's too bad. Not a huge fan of his right now, so we'll see. Again, he's another player that might just need to reset in the offseason and go sign somewhere else.
Yeah, but maybe, I'm wondering if the Bruins can't get in the playoffs and he has maybe a good playoff. I hope he doesn't have a good playoff because it's going to be against the Leafs. So
it will be.
Secretly, I just want him to not. I want him to struggle.
Yeah, boy, we have to talk about last night's game, by the way, at some point. So,
well, let's go. Well, that's all the players I have.
Well, I'm fine with stopping it there and moving on. So, one play in particular, and it to me it kind of summed up how I feel about Toronto's defense and how much I am worried for them. And it's the 4th goal against Anderson when all 4 guys just collapsed on I can't remember who it was in the corner and just left a guy wide open to score on Anderson with no effort at all.
Well,
your thoughts?
I'll say this. According to Nazem Kadri, a lot of players are sick. Hyman missed last night.
Like sick or just sick of it?
They have the flu.
Oh, okay.
So the flu is going around that team. Hyman was missed last night because of the flu. Other players have been, not feeling the best. I can't imagine. I think I've been sick a couple times and still gone and played. I usually actually have pretty good games. I think I'm trying to work so hard to just push through it. But I do think that certainly at that level has got to affect you. Also, there are Jake Gardner's been missed some time. There's been quite a few injuries. Kasperi Kapanen's out with a concussion right now. They're just kind of these weird little injuries that have been popping up. Doesn't excuse Pee-wee hockey style, everybody go run to the puck. But we see that happen from time to time. I'm worried about the Bruins top line, and that's it.
Okay.
If you can figure out a way to stop, if you stop them, you're going to win. That's a fact.
I would agree. Absolutely.
That's a fact. You're going to win.
Krejci, okay, he's got some offense to his game, but he doesn't have anybody to play with.
Right. Well,
because no one else.
When you match let's assume that Tavares, maybe it's like Tavares and Marner are going to pair up against the Patrice Bergeron line.
Yeah, they're the defensive line I think that Babcock trusts the most right now.
Or maybe maybe it's Kadri and Nylander are going up against them. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You're going to put one line up against them, or maybe you're just going to, you've got a couple options that you'll put out against them. I mean, whoever gets to go up against Patrice or against David Krejci, you're not as worried because, okay, it's Austin Matthews matched up against him, or it's Tavares, or it's Kadri. And at very least, Kadri, I think, is probably pretty even with him. So I do think that the Leafs can win that series. It depends on how many goals the Bruins defense can score for them, I think. And I'll say this. Last year in the playoffs with Zdeno Chara, I thought that the Leafs did a great job at exposing Zdeno Chara. And so if they can do that again, if Chara appears to be just a step behind once again, once the speed picks up and guys are going all out because it's the playoffs, will Chara look slow again? Because he definitely, I remember specifically, he made some mistakes behind his own net, just giving the puck away because he couldn't make a decision fast enough. Here we are a year later. Will that come up again?
Yeah, I'll give you that. I do worry. Hopefully, Frederik Andersen can get back into the swing of things. Being pulled the last two games with that defense in front of him, I'm not surprised that they gave up.
Not Anderson's fault.
No, not at all. But I'm just he needs to get back to where he was playing at, and so does that defense. I
wonder if he's sick too.
Yeah, that could be. But
that's always possible.
Interesting.
Let's talk the Eastern Conference wild cards because, well, I think that'll have to include the Metro. The Leafs are what they're 8 points ahead of Montreal with 12 games left to go. That's almost a lock.
Yeah, that top three, just like the Pacific, I think they're locked in. They're not going anywhere. It's just whether or not maybe Toronto can catch Boston for that number 2, that home ice. But we'll see. Now
a big game tonight, or I'm sorry, tomorrow night, Friday night. Columbus and Carolina play each other. So that game will either Carolina kind of pulls ahead, or Columbus kind of pulls things even. And if Montreal can beat the Islanders tonight, then you've got 3 teams tied at 83 points. The Penguins have put together a really nice stretch. 6-2-2 in their last 10. They're getting better goaltending. They did go in and they beat Washington in Washington. So that's a big, I think there's something about that rivalry. Those games can catapult the Penguins into finishing this season strong. I really do think that if a team in this league can flip the switch, is it not the Penguins?
Well, yeah. We've seen it. Crosby, he's been playing like a man possessed lately, so like maybe that was the catalyst right there, right?
Isn't that just the definition of his entire career?
It really.
He's just, he's not as fast as McDavid. He doesn't have as good of a shot as Ovechkin.
Nope.
He's not as good of a passer as Joe Thornton, but he puts it all together and he's unbelievable and is always in the freaking right place at the right time.
He really is.
Maybe he has the best hand-eye coordination out of anybody.
Yeah, that might be true, actually.
That's possible. So okay, let's give some predictions. My guess is that we both think Philadelphia is out and done with, 5 points back. Are we counting them out, or
I would say they're out.
Okay, so that leaves us with maybe 4 teams competing for the bottom, or for 3 spots. Although Montreal isn't competing for the bottom spot in the Metro, so really 3 teams competing for 2 spots, and then the other 3 teams competing for 1. I don't know.
Sure. Make it more confusing for the listeners.
Who do you think ultimately makes it at this point? Now we're 12 games left.
I think who's in now is staying in. Now, while I don't think they might go in and out at some point, like Columbus might drop, Montreal might get in, I do think ultimately Columbus and Carolina grab those last 2 wild card spots. Now, maybe they unseat Pittsburgh at some point, and maybe Pittsburgh falls into a wild card spot, or maybe the Islanders go on a bit of a stretch now where they just start tanking it. I don't know. We'll see. But either way, I do think Carolina and Columbus are in. Montreal is out.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you, except for I'm going to be kind of a dick. Because I really want the Blue Jackets to miss the playoffs.
Well, I don't blame you.
I just have this like...
it would be great to see, like, you put all that effort in all those trades, you're going all in, and then it blows up in your face just so badly. And I mean, that would be just real bad. So
yeah. So that is my, I guess my negative wish. I'm kind of rooting against them,
but
just
I
because
hate
it's interesting to see
Montreal. I do not want them to be successful.
Yeah,
and get in.
Montreal in the playoffs is so good.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
Fun.
It would be great if we see Montreal Toronto matchup.
Would you
at some
rather
point.
see Montreal in the playoffs or Columbus or Carolina? Like Carolina, all right. Carolina, at least they're doing like some weird stuff. Those bunch of jerks. At least they're doing interesting things. Columbus to me just is not interesting. They're going to get in and it's going to be this. All right, they squeaked in. Now can this team like take what they did and catapult forward and finally win a round?
But here's the thing.
What a boring storyline. Can they finally win a round? That's your story.
No, my thing with Columbus over Montreal is even further than my hatred for Montreal is the fact that if Columbus gets in, I legitimately think they could win a round. They could beat some of these teams at the top. They could potentially push Tampa Bay. They could push Washington, depending on where they finish, and maybe beat one of those teams. Now, Montreal gets in. I don't care who they're playing. Washington, Tampa Bay, even the Islanders first round. Boom. I think they're done. They're in and out in 5 games.
Okay, that is a fair point that Columbus is a better first round matchup. Maybe a more interesting game.
Yes.
That's a fair point. I guess in my hatred, although I have no reason to hate Columbus, they've never done anything to me.
They are in the same city as a certain football team that I hate. So
that's true. That's a great point. Okay, well we'll sneak on over to the Western Conference, where it is. We've kind of touched on it a little bit. Do you see anything changing? That's my, right now as it sits, Winnipeg, Nashville, St. Louis, and you've got San Jose, Calgary, Vegas, and then it's Dallas, Arizona. Is this the order we're going to go in with? Do we see some flip-flopping? What do you think?
This one's tough. I love the storyline of Arizona. As many man games lost as they've had, and Rick Tocchet, the job he's done. And not only that, but as a goaltender, Darcy Kepner is just a great storyline. The problem is they're like Montreal. They get in, right? They're getting bounced real quick, I think. I don't see them going very far at all. At least Dallas, I know they've got potentially 2 decent lines where they can match up. Granted, Zuccarello comes back, right? That would be exciting to watch them. Minnesota, same thing. They get in. I think they're exciting enough to watch where I think they've got some offensive weapons where they can be a little dangerous, and if Dubnyk turns it on, even more so. The problem is boy, Minnesota just hasn't really looked that great lately. And 6-2-2 in their last 10, which isn't bad, but considering how well the teams in front of them are playing, it's going to be tough. So I don't know if I have an answer for you on that one.
I think, to me, I want to see like Minnesota misses the playoffs. People just go, okay, like we kind of been looking at this team to dip, and they traded away Granlund. There's some moves that they traded away Niederreiter. There were some moves that kind of pointed to this team rebuilding. They also lost Koivu all year. They lost Dumba all year. Like this is kind of a throwaway year. If they make the playoffs, they'll be happy. If they miss, I don't think they're going to be that upset other than some of the revenue lost. If Arizona makes the playoffs, this is massive for their development.
It's great for the NHL.
People were talking about Rick Tocchet getting fired after 1 year because they played so poorly. Remember that start they had last year that was just horrendous? They had another pretty bad start this year too. And of course they experienced all these injuries. Just to get in the playoffs, even if they get swept, that is a massive win for this organization.
I want to see Grabner get in the playoffs and score like 4 shorthanded goals on breakaways,
yes,
which would be fun. Their leading goal scorer in Arizona, Clayton Keller, only has 16 goals. How they're winning with that is ridiculous.
And yet they have more goals than the Dallas Stars.
I don't understand it. It just blows my mind. I mean, they're getting balanced scoring up and down the lineup, which is awesome. And their defense. Dude, Arizona's defense, when they're all healthy and on, dude, they're on.
It's a good defense.
It's a good defense. It's real. And when it come playoff time too, those are the games where you get like 2-1, 1-0 type games, and I think Arizona could benefit from that because they have such a good defensive core and they're getting hot goaltending right now.
Do you think we see any switch between Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville? Like, is there any chance that Nashville or Winnipeg get jumped?
I don't think Nashville or Winnipeg get jumped. I do think St. Louis could falter and move down and Dallas up into a top 3 spot. I do see that being a possibility now. Whether or not Winnipeg or Nashville flip-flop 1 and 2 all season is probably going to happen. But
the problem is Dallas can't seem to win away from home. They're 15, 17, and 3 away from home, and they're going to have to play some away games down the stretch here. Whereas Minnesota has played, or St. Louis has played pretty balanced, and especially as of late, they've played pretty well at home. And so I see St. Louis kind of hanging where they are. I think that it's a miracle that they are where they are after that start that they had. Kudos on that for that team to kind of rally and pull things together. But
I'll tell you what, though, if I'm San Jose, I do not want to finish anywhere outside that number 1 spot in the Pacific because
I don't want to play Vegas.
No,
I'll
do
take
not.
them in the second round, please.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a better
Let
second
Calgary wear them down a little bit.
Well,
me,
I think,
if anything,
I think Calgary beats Vegas.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think that Calgary has something special's happening there this year, and James Neal's on their fourth line. The playoffs.
Jason Spezza is on Dallas' fourth line.
Don't forget, the playoffs is a new season.
Yeah, that's his bread and
And
butter.
guys can go, I had a horrible year. I'm just going to give it all I've got right here. And they can change their seasons around. Guys that you looked and they had 7 goals all year long, they can have 7 goals in a playoff run. It's not crazy for it to happen.
There you go.
Exactly. A guy who was waived by the Washington Capitals, he'll probably come in and score goals in the playoffs. Like, that's just what happens. There's certain players that it's that time of year. I don't know why. There's statistically people will go, oh no, that's not really real. Yes, it's real. It's just you can't overpay those guys because in the regular season they're not going to be good. They're not going to be good enough for 82 games, but they can get into this stretch for 20 games where they play way above their pay grade.
Yeah, and let's face it, you got to get in first before those guys can.
Exactly. Exactly. Which Washington. Fortunately for them, nobody picked up Devontae Smith-Pelly when they put him on waivers when they were making some deals at the deadline. He'll be back and they'll be good. Any other final thoughts before we kick the can on over to the weekend?
No. This will be an interesting final race for the playoffs. I'm excited for these last dozen games here. It's going to be wonderful.
I'll say one thing that these last 10 games are hard if your team is locked in a certain spot. Even if you're like San Jose or Calgary, these games they're like, they can still be fun. They can still be great games. I'm more interested in the playoff races. Like
absolutely.
I start to veer away now that the Leafs they're going to make the playoffs. It's fine. I'm really not worried about it. I'm worried about a first round matchup with Boston because either way, the second best team in the Eastern Conference loses in the first round.
Right.
So maybe third best. Maybe that's not giving enough credit to Washington, who has just gone ham lately too. But I'm tuning into a Dallas, Minnesota games that I haven't been looking at in the during when it game 35. Now I'm looking at these because they're exciting and they mean something. They've got a lot more, just a little bit more grit to those games. So you want to watch the playoffs right now? Go and find those games where it's teams battling for the playoffs to get in, and to me they're more exciting. And sometimes you get those games where it's a team so far in the playoffs and a team out of the playoffs. So the team out of the playoffs is just scratching and desperate to get any point they can because they think that they can win, and then we're only 6 points out now, and now we're 4 points out, and then you lose 2 in a row and you're way back again. And it's
Florida.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd rather watch those tightly knit games there. So with that said, we hope you enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. Our next show, I'm sure, will be recorded here sometime soon. I'm actually going to Chicago for a wedding.
Ooh.
So I'll be gone this weekend. But early next week, we'll be back for another episode of Overtime Hockey Talk. Justin, where can people find us?
OT Hockey Talk.
Yeah, where?
Twitter.
On Twitter.
Yeah, there you go. Where?
I don't know why I just went into preschool mode. I'm sorry. All right, guys, have a good weekend.